Wow, that gospel is harsh. If your hand causes you to stumble, cut it off. Jesus isn't advocating self-mutilation. He's making a point, which I'll explain in a minute. But first, what's a stumbling block? It could be physical or it could be mental. Late last fall, I was walking my dog Pal along 17th Avenue, and it wasn't icy, but there was a little snow. I stubbed my toe. In slow motion, I fell forward. First my knees, then my arms went way out, and my nose skidded on the pavement. I waited for blood. There wasn't any. So I went home and just had a couple scratches on my nose. So that's your physical stumbling block. But Jesus is talking about mental stumbling blocks. And to understand why Jesus is so frustrated in this passage, we need to look at the passages just prior to this. Jesus and his disciples have been moving south through Galilee on their way to Jerusalem, and Jesus has told the disciples twice that he's going to be put to death and put into the grave and rise again in 3 days and ascended to heaven. And the disciples don't understand. They try to deny a little bit, but they don't say what, when, where, why. Instead, Jesus hears them arguing amongst themselves, which one of us is the greatest? Jesus responds that whoever is the last will be first, and a servant to all. It's like if you have instructions for your child, something that they really must remember, and you get done with your little lecture and they say, "Can I have a popsicle?" And you know that they've been thinking about that orange cylinder on a stick. As our gospel begins, the disciples are still ignoring Jesus' announcements of death and resurrection. And they tell Jesus that there's a man casting out demons in your name, but we tried to stop him because he was not one of us. That's exclusion. They wanted to exclude, and Jesus told them not to stop, because whoever is not against us is for us. Exclusion was a stumbling block, maybe for us too. So Jesus exaggerates to get their attention. And when he talked about the hand and the foot and the eye, he meant human nature. So sandwiched in the middle of his exaggerations is his instruction for the disciples, which is service and sacrifice. How do we keep from stumbling? During the withdrawal from Afghanistan, before the terrorist attacks, there was a news clip on ABC that I saw a couple times. It was right beside the airport wall. And if you saw pictures of that, it was a tall wall. Anyway, the video clip showed hands reaching up, holding a baby, and hands reaching down to take that baby to safety. Sacrifice and service. An example from World War II took place in Nazi-occupied Poland. There was a family of gypsies. They were circus people. They were acrobats who flew through the air and caught each other. But the circus was shut down. So they were living in a large tenement in Poland. And you know that Nazis hated gypsies just as much as they hated Jews. This gypsy family left their apartment to stand in a food line. But they didn't take their little girl, who was playing with the Polish family next door. While they were gone, the Nazis ransacked their apartment, and when they didn't find anyone or anything, they stationed themselves at the front and the rear door of the tenement. The Polish father went out, found the gypsy family, and said, "You can't come back. You have to leave right now." But they wouldn't leave without their little girl. They devised a plan. At 2 a.m., the Polish father was to sneak by the Nazis and stand in the courtyard. The Polish man was to take the little girl to the roof, where she was to count to 50 and jump. It was cold and it was windy, and she started to count. 1, 2, 3. She wanted to whisper, "Father, right down there." But she didn't dare, because the Nazis would hear. 48, 49, 50. She took a deep breath and jumped. In the morning, the courtyard was empty. There wasn't blood. There wasn't any sign of a disturbance. Service and sacrifice, the point of the gospel lesson. What are our stumbling blocks? When church council was elected in January, they didn't know Pastor Carl would be leaving, a major stumbling block. And then Pastor Chuck became available, willing to serve our congregation. And our congregation stepped up, making sacrifices. The call committee spent hours preparing our profile, getting ready to interview candidates. Council had a lot of extra work preparing the contracts, the compensation package. Education has gone on. We had Bible school, Sunday school is going, volunteers teaching confirmation. Pastor Chuck organized the visitation committee. But just because we're in the process of calling a pastor doesn't mean that we can sit back and think, "Whew, we got through that." If you listened to Pastor Chuck's sermon last Sunday, let me remind you the topic was the call. And he didn't mean the call of a pastor. He meant the call that comes to each of us. So, we need to step up when we hear that call to service. It might be an internal call. Our minds might think, "I should, but." Or the call might come from a neighbor, a member of the congregation, a call to service. A new pastor will need all our energies to help settle in and help us remain a vibrant congregation. Dear God, help us to overcome our personal stumbling blocks, whatever they may be, and answer God's call in our congregation, our community, and the world. Amen.